responding for Sinn Féin, the Taoiseach heckled continuously. And rather than behave like a Taoiseach, Seachtain Kenny behaved like a delinquent or a character out of Father Ted. I'm thinking of Father Dougal, or perhaps even Father Jack, gesturing and shouting at the Sinn Féin speakers. And this struck me as rather odd on such a significant day, that the leader of the government was far from being composed or confident. And I asked myself why. After all, yesterday's budget was hailed as the ending of austerity and the launch of the new recovery. But the Taoiseach's lack of composure is evident also in how he handled the McNulty affair and in other issues. And yesterday, in my view, it's because he knows that this budget doesn't live up to the government's spin. You see, the Taoiseach knows that the government had the opportunity to lift the burden from long-suffering citizens. Instead, you brought in a short-term, two-tier budget. The government had the ability to get rid of the water charges and the family home tax and to take the remaining 210,000 lowest-paid workers out of the tax net. The government decided not to do this. Instead of giving more to those who have less, the government gives more to those who have more and less to those who have less. No equality, no inclusivity, no fairness. And that's the limit of the vision of this bad and incompetent government. And it is possible, in my view, to measure the standards of a society by the way society treats its disadvantaged, its poor, senior citizens, children and citizens with disability. And it's also been my view, and I think this is the case universally shared, that any party's view of the economy is based on its core political values. So if you're for privatisation, if you're for market-led economic policy, if you don't believe in the right to public services, you will have a particular view. If it's every man or woman for themselves, that will be represented in your economic policy. And that is the view best represented by this government's austerity policies. However, if you believe in a real republic, if you believe in a citizen-centred, rights-based society, if you believe in equality, there's a strange word. If you believe in equality, in the right to a home, to universal health services, to a job, to access to education, to freedom, then that too will shape your economic policy. And that's the ground that Sinn Féin stands on. In my experience, the majority of citizens always want to play their part. The majority of people will respond positively to positive leadership. That's the same in terms of getting the economy moving forward and dealing with the debt. But the problem that thinking people have is the absence of any notion or any degree of fairness or equality in the approach adopted by this government and the previous Fianna Fáil government, and the huge gap between the rhetoric and the substance of what they do. In Fine Gael's infamous, I rarely hear you referencing it now, Taoiseach, 5-point plan, you said, Fine Gael believes passionately that Ireland needs a new start, that the only way to save our country is to change it. Fine Gael wants to do more than rebuild Ireland. We want to transform it, to create from the ashes of the old a new Ireland that is better, stronger and fairer. Rhetoric without substance. Since 2011, Fine Gael and Labour have attacked the welfare of our citizens from the cradle to the grave, as you demolish the most basic social protections. In a series of brutal austerity budgets, you imposed a range of cuts and taxes that amounted to a direct attack on low and middle-income households. Agus tá na Bartas seo an éideann na daoine atá sin, ar seán daoine, agus ar daoine óga. You followed the path laid out for you by your Fianna Fáil predecessors, and you hid behind the Troika at every turn as an excuse for what you were doing. And the failure of the government to deal with retrospective bank capitalisation has locked future generations of Irish citizens into debt and has placed an unsustainable burden on the economy. Servicing the debt, you don't need me to remind you, will cost the taxpayer $8 billion this year. Fine Gael and Labour have not governed in the interests of Irish citizens. You have not governed in the common good, Instead, you've been guided by a destructive, antisocial ideology of austerity and in your own perceived narrow party political interest. Simply put, you've put ideology and electoralism before the common good with inevitable disastrous consequences. Austerity is a bad policy choice. It's bad for the economy. It doesn't work. Well, it depends what you want the economy to do, of course. But if you want the economy to be a servant of the people, as opposed to the people being slaves to the economy, then, of course, that's something else entirely. It's also bad for society. It's bad for us as people. It's bad for our communities. It has slowed down the rate of recovery. It has led to the dismantling of public services. It has inflicted unnecessary damage to this state's shambolic health system. It's decimated rural communities. You're bound to know this, Taoiseach. Small Indigenous businesses, and they remain the largest employer in the state, are collapsing and are being allowed to collapse. Agus tá lán daoine tá na phobal bheoga ar fud an stáit tá siad scriste go háirithe muintir na tuatha. And I see this damage in my own constituency of Louth, which has suffered as a result of unemployment and emigration and, of course, partition. But mortgage debt, homelessness is a major issue. And the lack of public services, in particular the health and ambulance services, are seriously struggling, being staffed by really, really good people, struggling to meet demands. And in the meantime, schools, post offices, Garda stations are closing at an alarming rate, or they are underfunded. And your commitment to austerity has pushed more and more people into poverty and severe financial hardship, with the attendant social ills of increased mental health problems and an accelerated suicide rate. I had your attention for almost 8 minutes, and then I lost you. Isn't it interesting? Islam. 7 people live at the risk of poverty. Clearly not on the benches over there, last Concordia. 1 in 4 live in a jobless household. Now, have they not the right to recovery? The government has failed to create jobs at anything approaching a sufficient level. And your policies...
Argentina.
Could we have order, please, for the Speaker? I think we have... Sorry, we have respect... No, we have given respect to every person up to now, please. Deputy Adams says the
Concordia. I look to you to keep order here, last Concordia.
I'll do my best. I will do my best, certainly.
Thank you, last Concordia. I have every confidence in you.
Can you start, please, now?
Go on, Margaret. The great safety valve, being the great safety valve of successive Irish governments, the course of emigration has continued at a frightening rate and has been embraced by this government as a policy option. There are 28,000 less young people in employment since Labour and Fine Gael entered government. There are currently 374,800 people on the live register. And I know you don't want to see that. I know that. But this budget will not reverse that situation. You had the opportunity to start a process of reversing 6 years of successive pay cuts and stealth charges, which have stretched ordinary families just to meet their daily needs and to avoid plunging into further debt. Continued wage cuts means that having a job, that's the reality. People who are in work today isn't sufficient. It doesn't guarantee that a family can make ends meet from week to week. The austerity budget, as I said earlier, has brought emigration to levels unprecedented in modern times. 500,000 citizens, almost 500,000, have left this state in the last 8 years. 224 citizens emigrate every single day in a search of a better standard of living and a better future. And some of them are leaving jobs to do that. And it isn't a lifestyle choice. It's because they cannot live here. What an indictment that 500,000 of our citizens are forced to flee. And there is, again, this societal damage, the huge cost in human terms to families, to society, to communities. To Charlie, fod fáid na hurran, hís go dana leis and 5 more seo. And we've all met people, Mayo, people are scattered throughout the world. You meet people in tears as they recount how the children that they reared and educated have been forced to leave for Canada, Australia and elsewhere. So we are raising our children for export. What was needed this week was a budget designed for a fair and sustainable recovery, for inclusivity, a recovery that leaves no family behind, not one that rewards the better off. And despite the furious spinning by the government sources before and after its publication, the basic unfairness of your political and economic approach has been reinforced by this budget, because politics is fundamentally about choices. It's about making the choices that will have the most beneficial effects for the citizens, for society and for the economy. It's about making the choices that benefit the elderly person, the elderly couple, or the bachelor or the spinster living up the long lane in isolated parts of rural Ireland. And bear in mind as winter approaches that older people living with the reality of fuel poverty will be forced to go to bed early or to save on heating bills, but neither worried about the cost of a cup of tea or a warm bath. And the Taoiseach lauds the €5 rise in child benefit. This was, you will recall, a red line issue for the Labour Party and opposition. Now, the government itself cut child benefit.
Order, please. Sir, order, please. Sir, now, please, members. Deputy Adams has the floor.
So the government had already cut child benefit by between €10 and €47 per child each month. You cut the annual back-to-school clothing and footwear allowance for poor families by €100. That's what you did. And all the while, the cost of living and education have been rising and pushing more and more families into debt. You cut maternity benefit by €32 per week, and the lone parents' economic disregard was cut from €146.50 to €90 as a consequence of which a working lone mother is down €28 each week. But maybe they don't count. You know, you have dried the marrow from the bone. Last conclusion.
There will be an opportunity. There'll be an opportunity for members to contribute after the Adams. It's not a time for questions. It's not a time for questions. In fairness, Minister, Deputy Adams.
And also, if I can just remind you, I never said one word when the Taoiseach and the Taoiseach were speaking. Not one word. I listened intently to what they had to say because I wanted to hear what they had to say. They are our government, after all. I expect the same courtesy. So, against this backdrop, struggling families will barely notice the extra €5 per month in their child benefit announced and much lauded by the Taoiseach today. So you had a choice. It was whether to lift the burden from the low and the middle earners or to continue protecting the interests of the wealthiest and the most privileged sections of society. And you choose, instead of reducing the tax burden on the majority of working families, you choose to reduce the top rate of tax. So it's a case of tax breaks for the wealthy and water charges for those who are struggling. And with this budget, the dismantling of our public health system and the privatisation, eventually, of our public health system continues apace. Before the recession, our health system was underfunded. After 6 harsh years of cuts to budgets and staff, it's even more starved of resources, and we have overcrowded hospitals such as Our Lady of Lourdes and Drogheda are testimony to that. Again, despite the skills and the ability and the commitment and the good-heartedness of the staff on those institutions. And rather than learning the lesson of your disastrous withdrawal of medical cards from people in dire need, remember that? People had their medical cards taken off them, and then the Taoiseach stood up here week after week, month after month, saying there had been no change of policy. So you've left our hospitals and our health services in the impossible position of trying to do more with less. This budget does nothing to address the crisis in health, and this failure will have negative consequences for patients across the state in the time ahead. The chronic housing crisis, that will continue. There remain huge numbers of families in mortgage arrears, and with rents rising out of control, with no government intervention to deal with the situation. The government won't intervene. The government will not bring in rent controls. We'll sit up all night. We'll award big bankers. We'll give all sorts of bonuses to others. We'll give taxpayers' money to consultants. But we won't intervene to stop the Rachmanism that's prevalent in a lot of the private renting sector. And there are families being forced into homelessness because the government refuses to invest properly in social housing. And the measures in today's budget fall far short of what is needed and fail to recognise the sheer scale of the housing crisis. What people wanted yesterday was a fair budget. A fair budget which would have given low and middle income households a real and substantial break. A fair budget that would have given the people who are most damaged by the cuts, that they would see that reversed and the deficit reduced through a new and progressive tax policy. And we demonstrated in Sinn Féin, under the leadership of Pearse Doherty, how to do this in our alternative budget submission. Ach mar as gra near éist and realtas leis nadini. We'll go back to this notion of, the great play you're making around child benefit. Maternity benefit cut, lone parents income disregard cut, school clothing cut, footwear cut, child benefit itself cut. So none of this that's spun by the government signals any end to austerity. In fact, many of the people who will benefit from this were never adversely affected by austerity in the first place. Many of the people who are affected positively by this don't even know there is a recession. So for the vast majority of citizens, it's business as usual. And you see, here's the rub. You could have introduced a different budget. We saw it in our thoughtful, costed proposals to repair the community, to rebuild the economy and to renew society. We would have put 800 million back into the pockets of ordinary workers through the abolition of the property tax and by stopping water charges. The Taoiseach today in Leader's Question said that he would not do that. We sought to help end forced emigration of our young people by restoring the job seekers' payment for those under 26 over 2 years. We prioritised investment in health and education to make back to school more affordable and recruit an additional 1,000 nurses and midwives. We proposed investing $1 billion from the Strategic Investment Fund to build the additional 6,600 houses over the next 18 months and to create 8,000 jobs. So, Taoiseach, that's what a real and genuine initiative would actually look like. We sought to invest an additional $202.6 million in disability services. Well, that was one of the Taoiseach's red line issues. I remember it well. What is your red line issue that Taoiseach was asked? And he gave his answer on that, child benefit. And what is your red line issue, Taoiseach? And he gave his was disability services. We proposed reducing the salaries and allowances of high earners in the public sector and the Oireachtas. In short, we offered a way to ease the burden on ordinary citizens and to build and rebuild the domestic economy. We offered a fairer, more equal way forward. We proposed removing all citizens earning under the minimum wage, removing them out of the USC net, while keeping the exemption for households earning under 60,000 and on medical cards. In a full year, our tax-raising measures would bring in an additional $1.7 billion through a third rate of income tax, restoring capital gains tax and CA2 to 40% and a 3% betting tax and a range of other measures. However, Sinn Féin's net tax increase would be just $263.7 million, as our measures would see $1.5 billion going back to low and middle income families. And not only is that the right thing, the fair thing, the decent thing to do, it's also the economically smart thing to do, because those people will spend the money and that money will generate and that money will keep the economy stimulated. We also sought to reverse cuts to the respite care grant. You know, there were 70,000 carers, Taoiseach, let me tell you this, who were bitterly disappointed at your refusal to restore the respite care grant. It's a measly €325 a year for carers. You gained more on this budget than what these people have lost. Small amount of money, but in a small, low economy family, it's an awful lot of money. I would ask you even now to reconsider this position. It would cost the state, I'm sure if you went out and asked the people in the plebiscite would they agree to this, I'm sure they'd say yes. It would cost the state $29.6 million. We also sought to increase the family income supplement. So equality, equality, equality is what has to underpin our approach to the economy, and every measure has to be looked at. And this is the maze that Labour's in. They cannot see that you have to equality-proof measures, and you have to look at the social consequences of what you're bringing in. In my view, you've lost the plot. You do not care about the crippling effect on citizens and families of the property tax, of the water tax, and a range of other stealth charges. You've been shown the evidence, you've been given fair alternatives, but you press on, you dismiss it. And the budget is a far cry from, again, the 5-point plan. Political failure, citizens were told, lies at the heart of Ireland's economic failure. To fix the economy, we must also fix the political system. Taoiseach, you have treated the political system here, and you're probably the oldest, or certainly the longest-serving person here. You've treated it with contempt. And I don't understand that. Maybe you've been here so long that you live in a bubble. Not only have you used all of the public office state boards and Shannon and other accoutrements here for your own party political benefit and the benefit of friends, but this is the very thing that you railed against Fianna Fáil doing before you. And we witness how you blatantly ignored the clear statement of the electorate in favour of a radical reformed Shannon. So let's be clear. The government's talking about recovery, but struggling families do not see any evidence of that in their daily lives. Last Saturday in Dublin, people told the government that there is enough of austerity. The same thing happened in the by-elections. If you think for 1 second that this budget and the government's selling off it will assuage that expression of public anger, I can tell you you're badly mistaken. And you can be quite cynical. You can work out that Fine Gael has such and such a section of the vote, and if we look after them, the others will footer about and get tripped up and so on and so forth, and we'll get back because we're catering for the people who we think fit into our demographic. That's not what it should be about, Taoiseach. That's not what your role as a Taoiseach should be about, because you're the Taoiseach. You sit in here, you're not the leader of Fine Gael. You're the Taoiseach. You have a responsibility on behalf of all the citizens of the state. So people are demanding very clearly an end to the unjust water tax. And, you know, it was Fianna Fáil's idea, but your government are implementing it. And that's the backdrop to the reliefs. Some of them are modest, but that's the backdrop to the reliefs you have announced today. You've kept some water bills at €100. So why should citizens have €100 less of a water bill that they shouldn't have to pay in the first place? Like someone stealing your wallet and then giving you a few quid to get back home. 856,000 citizens, working people, will not be able to avail of this cap. So the message is very, very clear. You must scrap domestic water charges. We have shown you, and you can rubbish this all you want, but you know it's the truth, how a first-class water service can be paid for by the state without penalising working people. And Sinn Féin in government, if we ever get a mandate for government, would abolish water charges. And that's what you should have announced yesterday. It's necessary to adjust the deficit, sure. We accept that. We've tried to meet that target. I think we've shown how to do that without harming families or frontline services, by stimulating the economy instead of cutting the economy, and by asking the wealthiest to pay more. And look, I make no apologies. If it's a choice between taking money of a carer or a person with disabilities and asking the wealthiest to pay, that's a no-brainer for me. Your property tax, your water tax, the removal of medical cards, mortgage distress, the lack of social housing have pushed working people to the limit. And that's without even dealing with the effects, particularly in rural Ireland. We agree with you on lots of things. Ireland needs a new start, and the only way to save our country is to change it. I agree with you on that. A new Ireland is needed that is better, stronger and fairer. Political failure lies at the heart of Ireland's economic failure. But that all lies at the door of the three main Conservative parties that have ruled this state since partition: Fianna Fáil, yourselves and Fine Gael, and Labour, who in one way or other have been in government. And those who voted for the Labour Party in large numbers at the last election did so on the hope, because this is what they were asked to do, to put a brake on the more right-wing reactionary impulse of Fine Gael. But alas, that has turned out not to be the case. Labour is as locked into austerity policies as the Fine Gael parties. Where is the €1 billion strategic investment bank that the Labour Party promised? Why is Labour part of a budget that rewards the highest earners first and foremost? And I think there is a clear failure by Joan Burton to bring a change of direction to government budgetary policy, and that underpins the truth that a change of faces without a change of policy is meaningless. Many women are those in these low-paid jobs. There's no incentive, no initiative, no tax breaks for childcare, no Scandinavian model, as the Taoiseach promised. So, in conclusion, last Cloncolia, the budget fails to lift the burden from struggling families and hard-pressed citizens. It continues to support the basic inequality that exists in this society, and that's the government's legacy. Labour and Fine Gael ministers will be better off by 4 times more than a married couple with an income of €35,000. And I think that's a shame, Taoiseach. It's a shame on you. It's a shame on the Taoiseach. For our part, in our modest way, we will do our best to focus on demonstrating to citizens and to families throughout the state and throughout the island that there's a clear, workable and fairer alternative to the way this government is doing things. And we will continue to seek a mandate for to win support to take our society and our economy in a different direction based on genuine Republican principles of equality and fairness.
Now the next speaking slot is shared by Deputies John Halligan, Joe Higgins and Stephen Dunn.